Have you ever felt like you smiled? Just so no one would worry? That behind every "I'm fine," there was a world no one could see. Double quotes today, ... I want to tell you what I've hidden for so long. Not to expose myself, but to set you free. If you've carried a weight in your chest for years, if there are memories you've avoided for decades, this video is for you. And maybe it'll help you smile for real, for the first time in a long time, because it's never too late to heal the childhood no one saw. You see the smiling little boy in the photo, but you don't know about the looks he hid. No one knew. I learned to smile early, but not because I was happy. Smiling was the quietest way I found to cry for help. Without scaring anyone. While others saw a child playing, running around the yard, what I felt inside was ... something else. It was like being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. Like my presence was transparent. Like I had no voice. The fear of being invisible stayed with me for many years. And the strangest part? No one noticed. To the world, I was just another well-behaved boy. But inside me, there was a storm. A mix of anxiety, unanswered questions, feelings I didn't know how to name. And when you're a child and don't know how to name what you feel, you swallow it, you pretend. You get used to it. I got used to it. I got used to the long silences at the table, to the praise that never came, to the hugs that only existed in my imagination. And still, I smiled because deep down, I believed that if I smiled enough, maybe someone would notice, maybe someone would look beyond the smile. But they didn't. For many, childhood is remembered with nostalgia. For me, ... It's a minefield of unresolved memories. I became an expert at hiding. Hiding the fear of failure. Hiding the feeling of not being good enough. Even hiding the light in my eyes, when all I wanted was to be seen. And you know the hardest part? Even now, after so many years, that little boy still lives inside me. Sometimes I hear him. He doesn't scream. He doesn't throw a fit. He just whispers. And he asks me, will someone finally see me for real? And I sometimes still don't know what to say. If you're listening to me now, maybe you were that child too. Maybe you grew up in a home where no one heard you. Maybe you learned to stay silent too soon. Maybe you used joy as a shield. And if that's you, ... no, you're not alone. My childhood wasn't just trauma, don't get me wrong. There were good moments, real laughter, discoveries that still warm my heart today. But what stayed with me, ... what really shaped who I am, were the silences. The looks that begged for help and went unanswered. The Sundays when I waited for something to happen, and nothing did. I'm not sharing this for pity. I'm sharing for liberation. Because when we speak, we heal. And maybe, by hearing my story, you'll find space to embrace yours. Because every pain that goes unseen turns into a shadow. And every shadow that's acknowledged ... can finally find the light. Today, I look at that old photo with a different kind of tenderness. Not for the fake happiness, but for understanding the strength that little boy had to keep going. And now, instead of hiding his gaze, I bring it into the light, because only by facing what was behind the smile could I finally start to smile for real. The first great nightmare. I was about 10 years old when I learned that life could change in the blink of an eye. Until then, I believed the world was made of routines. Breakfast at the same time, school, playtime, dinner at 7. Everything seemed predictable, safe, too safe. But the world, I learned, doesn't warn you when it's about to change. It happened on a cloudy morning. I remember because the sky was gray, as if it knew what was coming. That day my father didn't come home. There was no goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. And silence, when it's unexpected, hurts more than 1,000 screams. That night, the house turned cold. The air felt heavy. My mother, always so strong, walked as if stepping on broken glass. And me, still a child, tried to understand what no one would say. "He's gone, son," she murmured, her eyes glistening. "But what do you mean gone? Why? When? Is he coming back?" Questions she wouldn't answer, not out of cruelty, but because she didn't know how. That's when my smile began to die, piece by piece, because until then, I believed people stayed. That promises were forever, that you could trust love. But I learned early that sometimes love leaves without a note. For weeks, I slept with the door slightly open. What if he comes back? What if it was all a misunderstanding, but the door stayed open, and the room empty, growing up with that absence shapes what you believe about the world. I started thinking everything could collapse at any moment, that affection was fragile, that love had an expiration date, and even when I tried to play, to laugh with friends, deep down, something ached. The first great nightmare of my life wasn't a monster under the bed. It was the absence of the person I admired most. It was the breaking of a bond I thought was unbreakable. And you know what hurt the most? Realizing that no one asked how I felt, not really, because I was a kid, because it'll pass. But it didn't pass. It stayed buried, became a knot in my chest. And that knot I carried for years. It kept me from trusting fully, from letting go, because deep down, a voice whispered, "Be careful, he might leave too." Now looking back, I understand that so many of us carry unresolved absences, people who left physically, or emotionally, parents who were there in body, but absent in affection, homes full of furniture and empty of hugs. If you've also been marked by a departure, know this pain has a name and it has a cure, but healing begins when you stop pretending it didn't hurt. The first great nightmare of my life taught me something precious. It taught me that silence wounds, but listening can heal, and that sometimes speaking about what hurt us is the first step toward healing. I learned to smile again, but not that childhood smile meant to please. Now, I smile for myself, and for that little boy who waited for so many years, for someone to open the door. The mask of everyday life. After that day, the world moved on. School continued. Birthdays came and went. Life, as they say, doesn't stop to let anyone heal. And I learned that too soon. I started wearing a mask every day. Not a carnival mask, not a theater mask. It was subtler, more disguised. The kind of mask you learn to build in silence. A polite smile, a rehearsed speech, a measured laugh, just enough so no one would suspect anything was wrong. I became known as the strong kid, the one who doesn't cry, who holds it together. And after hearing it enough, I started believing that weakness was feeling, and that hiding was what mature people did. But inside, every hidden gesture hurt. Every time I said, "I'm fine," when I wasn't. I betrayed myself. Every time someone said, "You're so cheerful," and I smiled back, a part of me wanted to scream, "You have no idea what I carry." And the saddest part? The mask worked. People believed it, because it was easier to believe the surface than to dive beneath. And the truth is, sometimes, even we don't want to look behind our own mask. Years passed like this. Work, marriage, kids, bills, responsibilities. And the mask stayed strong. It adapted to every phase. At work, I was the responsible professional. At home, the father who could handle anything. At church, the one who always said amen with faith. But at night, when the house fell silent, when everyone slept, it was just me. And the emptiness that never stopped visiting. It wasn't sadness all the time, just a constant feeling that I was living half a life, that everyone knew my version, but no one knew me. And with time, even I stopped recognizing myself. Even the mirror seemed to lie. It showed a tired face, still forcing a smile, and I'd stare and wonder, would anyone even see me if I let this mask fall? But the fear of disappointing was stronger. fear of not being understood, fear of seeming weak, fear that, if I took off the mask, I'd be abandoned again. And so I went on for years. Until I realized no one survives long while hiding from themselves, because eventually the body gets sick, or the soul screams, or the silence becomes an inner cry you can't ignore. I know that maybe you listening now are tired too, tired of keeping up appearances, of pretending nothing shakes you, of smiling at family gatherings while your heart begs to be held. I know, and you're not alone. Now, I understand that there's no greater strength than allowing yourself to be true, that taking off the mask isn't weakness. It's courage. It's freedom. And it was only when I started taking small steps to show who I really was, first to myself, then to others, that healing began. Slowly. In my own time. With fear, yes. But with the will to be whole, even if it was scary at first. Because deep down, every human being wants the same thing: to be seen, to be heard, to be loved without having to pretend. The secret about to explode. There came a time when the pain no longer fit inside me. It was as if, behind every word I spoke, there was another I wanted, but couldn't say. I talked about work, bills, politics, the weather. But what I really wanted to say was, I'm tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of smiling just to keep things running. Tired of carrying alone a burden I never asked for. The secret, the one always hidden behind my smile, began to stir inside me. Not in words, but in anguish. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my chest tight, as if I couldn't breathe. Sometimes just a smell, an old song, a misplaced word. And everything I'd buried, the memories, the trauma, the wounds, surged like a storm. You know that feeling when your soul cries for help, but your mouth keeps saying, I'm fine? That's how I lived. And the more I hid it, the lonelier I felt. Until one day, everything collapsed. Not in some dramatic scene. No screams, no outbursts. Just a simple gesture. A friend asked me, are you really okay? But he asked while looking into my eyes, with a pause, with silence, with presence. And for some reason, in that moment, I couldn't lie. My voice shook. My breathing was heavy. And the truth, for the first time in years, slipped through the cracks of my silence. I said, no, I'm not okay. And right then, I realized the weight I'd been carrying. It was like taking off an invisible backpack when I didn't even feel anymore. I'd gotten so used to it, but it had been there the whole time, keeping me from breathing deeply, keeping me from living lightly. The secret I'd been hiding wasn't just something from the past. It was everything that came after it. The shame I carried, the feeling that I didn't deserve happiness, the fear of being found out and rejected. The guilt for smiling while still bleeding inside. The secret was me. The me I hid from the world. And in many ways, from myself. But that day, something broke. And in place of the pain that spilled out, a space was born. A new space. A space for healing. Because what no one teaches us is that holding on to pain doesn't erase it. It just postpones it. And the longer we wait, the bigger it grows, until we become versions of ourselves we don't even recognize. Now, looking back, I understand. The secret I was so afraid to reveal was actually the key to my freedom. If you're listening to me now and you're hiding something too, a pain, a mistake, a trauma, a shame, know this: you don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to pretend to be strong all the time. You deserve to be embraced. You deserve to be true. And maybe, like me, you're just waiting for the right question at the right moment. 2. Finally let your soul breathe. The turning point. Pain only begins to transform when we acknowledge it. And it wasn't until I admitted in a low voice, almost a whisper, that I wasn't okay, that the real process began. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fast. There were no cheers or spotlights. It was In fact, silent. As silent as the years I'd suffered in silence. But there was one difference. Now, I was willing to listen to that silence. Instead of smothering it. The turning point didn't come from outside. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't someone coming to save me. It was an internal decision. I don't want to live like this anymore. Simple as that. And yet, profound. Because admitting that to yourself, after a lifetime of trying to seem whole, is like opening a window that's been locked for decades. The light came in slowly. At first, it even hurt. It was easier to stay in the shadows. I knew, but even afraid, I kept opening cracks. I started writing scattered words in an old notebook. I started talking to myself more, asking, what do you really feel? And for the first time, I listened without judgment. I also sought help, therapy books, spirituality, anything that could help me look inward without running away. And I discovered there was no monster inside. Just a wounded boy, a tired man, someone who'd been waiting for so long for permission to exist without pretending. The turning point was this: realizing I could be whole, even with broken parts, that I didn't have to wait until I was healed to live, that I didn't have to keep punishing myself for a past I never chose to carry. I began consciously choosing what to keep and what to let go. I let go of guilt. I let go of the need to please. I let go of the mask I'd worn for so long, and with empty hands, I began rebuilding myself. People noticed, you seem calmer. There's something different about you. But they had no idea. The difference was, for the first time, the truth showing through. No makeup, no act, no need for approval. I started living with more lightness. And no, that doesn't mean the pain disappeared. But it changed form. It stopped being a prison and became a road. Pain turned into a path. And where there was once weight, purpose began to grow. Now I understand. Life doesn't spare us from suffering, but it gives us choices. And one of the most freeing ones is the choice to stop pretending. To stop surviving and start living. If you too feel exhausted from carrying the world, if you look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and say to yourself, I don't want to live like this anymore. That might be the bravest sentence you ever say. And who knows, like it did for me, that might be your turning point. Lessons from the last decade. Life has a curious way of teaching. It doesn't hand you ready-made answers. It gives you experiences. And with time, if we pay attention, every pain becomes a lesson. Every fall becomes solid ground. Every silence finds its voice. Over the last 10 years, I've learned more about myself than in all my youth. Not because I sought answers outside, but because I finally allowed myself to listen within. And you know what I discovered? I discovered that time doesn't heal everything. It only reveals. It reveals what needs to be seen. It reveals what needs to be healed with love, not haste. And above all, time shows you who stays. I learned that loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of yourself. For many years, I was surrounded by others, but disconnected from me. I spoke, laughed, played my part, but I was living a life that wasn't truly mine. Now I understand. To really live is to have the courage to be authentic, even if it unsettles others, even if it means some will walk away, because the soul knows when it's at peace. And peace isn't negotiable. I also learned there's no greater strength than forgiveness. Not the kind we give others, though that matters too, but the forgiveness we give ourselves. Forgiving what we didn't do. What we endured out of fear, what we hid out of shame. Time teaches that we're human. And to be human is to fail, to stumble, but to keep going with dignity. The biggest shift, perhaps, was realizing I don't need to be perfect to be loved. That I don't need to always be okay to be respected. That my story, with all its scars, still has worth. In fact, those scars, now I see them as medals. They don't make me ugly. They prove I endured, that I stood when everything in me wanted to collapse, that I chose to live. When merely existing would have been easier, this last decade taught me, love isn't found in grand gestures. It's in the small, daily choices. In savoring a cup of coffee, slowly. In listening to a song that reminds you who you are. In looking into someone's eyes without hurry. I learned I don't need to run anymore. Life, after all, isn't a race. It's a crossing. And if I could give you one piece of advice, it's this: be gentle with yourself. You've already survived so much. Now, let yourself live lightly. Because in the end, it's not about what others think, not about what's left undone. It's about the peace you find when you look in the mirror and finally recognize who you are and smile, not a forced smile, but one that comes from the soul, from a soul set free. Stories worth telling. Once I began removing my own mask, I realized something powerful. I wasn't alone, behind so many familiar faces, behind so many polite smiles. There were other stories. Other silences, other secrets. So I started listening more, truly listening, with an open heart. And I met people who taught me life is worth it, even when it insists on being hard. Like Donna Marta, 73 years old, lost her husband, her son, and her will to live, all within 3 years. She said her body kept breathing, but her soul didn't. Yet every morning, she'd go outside to water the plants on her sidewalk, watering them like someone insisting on life. One day, she told me something I'll never forget. I'm not watering flowers. I'm watering the hope that they'll bloom again. And they did. Little by little, violets colored her WINDO, WSILL. And with them came quiet laughter, faith, presence. Now she teaches crochet at the local church, stitching stories of resilience between loops and yarn with other women who once wanted to give up too. Then there, Esu Alfredo. The man from the park, the one who sold candy and carried a quiet wisdom. No one knew he'd been a teacher, or that his greatest pain was never watching his grandson grow, kept apart by family feuds. But whenever he spoke of it, he didn't cry. He'd smile and say, "Life took many things from me, but it couldn't take my will to do good." And he did. He offered kindness to anyone who sat beside him. Children, teens, adults, they all stopped by. Without realizing it, they'd receive advice no book could teach. Advice born from pain and transformed into care. These stories, real, simple, human, showed me something precious. Not every wound becomes a trauma. Some become gardens. But only if we choose to tend them. So I ask you, what's the story you haven't told yet? What's the pain that, if shared, might become a bridge for someone else? What part of you still waits to be met with tenderness, not shame? Stories worth telling aren't made of perfection. They're made of courage, of persistence. Of starting over. And sometimes, all it takes is one story, one "I've been there too," to give someone else the strength to keep going. If today you feel your story no longer matters, listen closely. It does. It carries pieces of healing, not just for you, but for whoever out there sits in silence, waiting to find hope in your voice. And if you've made it this far, know this: you still have so much left to live. Beautiful chapters are waiting to be written, and they only need one thing: for you to keep choosing truth. To live as all that you are, light and shadow too, because these stories, the imperfect, the real, the deeply felt, these are the ones truly worth telling. Now that you've walked with me through all of this. Now that you've heard about my silent childhood, my first nightmare, my masks and wounds, I feel I can finally tell you the secret I hid behind my smile for nearly my entire life. It wasn't a crime. It wasn't an addiction. That it wasn't something that would tarnish my name. But it did stain my soul. My secret was the shame of never feeling enough. I smiled because I thought if I were always pleasant, people would like me. I overworked, overgave, stayed silent too much. all to compensate for that old voice whispering, "You'll never be good enough." That was the secret, that ancient wound from childhood, from abandonment, from absence, from love I never felt, I fully received. And when you grow up with that void, you try to fill it with everything except the truth. But today, seeing you here with me after all this, I understand my secret doesn't have to be a burden anymore, because it taught me it taught me compassion, to listen without judgment, to understand that behind every smile, there's a story, and that everyone carries a pain no one sees. So I want to extend an invitation to you, not just any invitation, but one that might change how you live your coming years. You listening now, perhaps hidden behind a polite smile, you carrying an old hurt, a regret, a grief that never healed. You saying, "I'm fine," but feeling empty in the quiet of night. Listen, it's okay not to be okay, it's okay to cry, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to want to be seen, and more than anything, it's time to take off the mask, it's time to let yourself live without pretense. You still have time, you still have life, you still have stories to tell, love to give, moments to live. So if this video touched your heart, I ask you, share it with someone you love. Write in the comments something you've always wanted to say, but never dared, and subscribe to this channel, because here, you'll never have to pretend to be someone you're not. Here, you are welcome, with all your scars, with all your truths, with all your heart, because behind your smile, there might be a secret too. But it doesn't have to stay alone anymore. We're in this together, and together, we can finally smile for real.